The unyielding line. The evac warnings came 14 standard months before the Voidborn reached our solar system. By then, 17 alien civilizations had already fallen silent. Not destroyed. Silence was worse. The Voidborn didn't leave ruins or radiation or bodies. They left nothing at all. Commander Elena Kress stood at the viewport of Lunar Defense Station Alpha, watching the evacuation ships stream away from Earth in gleaming silver arcs. Each carried thousands of terrified civilians racing for the sanctuary, worlds beyond the Perseus arm. They believed what the Galactic Council promised: safe haven, temporary refuge, until the Voidborn passed through our sector of space. Elena knew better. "Commander," Lieutenant Davis appeared at her side, his uniform crisp despite the chaos of the past week. "Admiral Jansen's transport has just departed. You're now acting commander of Earth's defensive forces." Elena didn't turn from the viewport. She'd been expecting this, yet the reality still felt surreal. "They all left? The entire High Command?" "Yes, ma'am. Under strategic redeployment orders." "Strategic cowardice," Elena muttered, watching another evacuation ship disappear into a hyperspace window. "How many remain?" "Roughly 42% of Earth's population has evacuated. The rest have either chosen to stay or can't afford passage." Davis handed her a tablet. "We've got 38 orbital platforms still operational, 19 deep space interceptors, and about 14,000 military personnel who refused evac orders. 14,000 to defend a planet of 4 billion stubborn souls." Elena finally turned from the viewport, her dark eyes reflecting determination rather than defeat. "It'll have to be enough." The Voidborn had appeared 2 years ago on the far edge of explored space. At first they seemed just another spacefaring race, unusual in their complete silence, but not overtly hostile. Then the Gethic colony on B. Helios 9 disappeared overnight, not attacked, not destroyed, simply gone, as if it had never existed. Soon after, the pattern repeated on Taurus Hub, then the mining outpost on Cygni Prime. Each time, all matter was simply erased. No distress calls, no debris, no survivors. The older races, the Ascendari with their millennia of diplomatic experience, the Volari with their unmatched technological prowess, had immediately recognized the existential threat. Without debate, they initiated the Great Migration, moving their populations away from the Voidborn's path. Other species quickly followed suit. Only humanity hesitated. Elena's comm unit chirped. "Commander, we have an unscheduled arrival at..." The outer marker. "One vessel. Unknown configuration." "Hostile?" "Negative. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. It's a refugee ship." Minutes later, Elena stood in the docking bay as the airlock cycled open. The vessel was clearly not designed for long-distance travel. Its hull showed makeshift repairs and jury-rigged systems. When the doors finally opened, a being stepped forward. It stood on 4 tentacle-like limbs, its upper body covered in iridescent scales that shifted color with each labored breath. "I am Zorth, last speaker of the Tellurian Council," the alien said through a translation device. "We seek sanctuary." Elena approached slowly. "The evacuation routes to sanctuary worlds are open. Why come here, to a planet in the Voidborn's direct path?" Zorth's scales darkened to a deep blue. "The sanctuary worlds are myths, Commander. The Voidborn do not follow predictable paths. They sense life and consciousness. They hunt it. Those who fled early simply delayed their ending." Elena felt a chill. "How do you know this?" "Because the Tellurians have witnessed it for centuries." Zorth produced a small crystalline device that projected a holographic star chart. "This was our migration over 300 years. Each time we fled, they followed. Each new home, erased. We are the last 5,000 of a species that once numbered billions. Why tell us this now? Because you humans did what no other species has done in our memory." Zorth's scales rippled with a pattern Elena couldn't interpret. "You chose to stand your ground." The revelation from Zorth spread quickly through Earth's leadership. the remaining members of the United Earth government convened an emergency session, broadcasting to every corner of the planet and off-world colonies that hadn't yet evacuated. President Amara Chen stood before the assembly, her face grim but resolute. Fellow citizens of Earth and her colonies, today we learned what we have long suspected. There is no outrunning the Voidborn. The evacuation routes lead nowhere. The sanctuary worlds are just another stop on a journey that ends in oblivion. Chamber erupted in shouts and protests. Chen raised her hands for silence. I will not order anyone to stay and face what's coming. The evacuation ships will continue operating for those who choose to leave. But as for Earth herself, we stand, we fight, not because we know how to defeat this enemy, but because someone must try. Elena watched the broadcast from her office on the lunar station. Beside her, Zorth observed silently. Your leader speaks with wisdom, the alien said finally. But fighting, the Voidborn, no weapon we have ever created even slows them. Then we'll need to create new weapons. Elena turned to the star chart spread across her desk. You've been running for centuries. Has anyone ever tried to understand what the Voidborn actually are? Zorth's scales pulsed red. Understanding death brings no comfort. That's where you're wrong, Elena replied. Understanding is everything. The next 3 months transformed Earth. Industries retooled for war production. Research facilities operated around the clock. The orbital defense grid was reinforced, and deep space sensors extended to the edges of the solar system. The massive particle accelerator on Mars was converted into a prototype weapon based on theoretical physics that might, just might, affect whatever the Voidborn were made of. Meanwhile, Zorth and the remaining Tellurians shared everything they knew about the enemy. It wasn't much. The Voidborn appeared as regions of distorted space, areas where light bent wrong and sensors returned impossible readings. They moved, relatively slowly, slower than light, but were impossible to track precisely. They seemed to consume all matter they encountered, leaving perfect vacuum in their wake. Elena established her command center within the lunar facility, coordinating the defense preparations. As the weeks passed, fewer evacuation ships departed. Humanity, it seemed, had collectively decided to take its stand. Why? Zorth asked her one evening as they reviewed the latest sensor data. Why do your people choose to stay when they could, have years more life elsewhere? Elena considered the question carefully. Because running just postpones the inevitable. But standing, fighting, that gives us a chance, however small, to change the outcome. Humanity has always been stubborn that way. Stubborn, Zorth repeated as if trying to understand the concept. Perhaps stubbornness is what the galaxy has needed. The first contact came sooner than expected. A deep space monitoring station near Neptune detected the anomaly, a region of space where stars seemed to waver and shift. Instruments failed to provide consistent readings. The station's AI recognized the signature from Zorth's data. Voidborn scouts. Time to impact with Neptune? Elena demanded, standing before the holographic display in the command center. 46 hours, 17 minutes, the tactical officer replied. They're moving faster than predicted. Elena made her decision instantly. Deploy intercept teams Alpha through Delta. I want the prototype weapons in position within 24 hours, and get me a direct channel to the research team on Mars. As orders flew across the command center, Elena stepped aside with her executive. Officer. The scouts are testing our defenses. The main force will be watching. You think they're that intelligent? He asked. I think anything that's survived this long in space and targets populated worlds isn't just a mindless force of nature. Elena stared at the anomaly readings. They're hunting, Commander, and we're about to show them that this prey bites back. Neptune's monitoring station transmitted continuously as the Voidborn scout approached. Scientists around the solar system watched, recording every scrap of data. When the anomaly finally made contact with Neptune's atmosphere, the effect was immediate and terrifying. Where the Voidborn touched, Neptune's swirling gases simply ceased to exist. A perfect hemisphere of nothingness began expanding through the planet's upper atmosphere. Within hours, A void several thousand kilometers across had opened in the gas giant. "It's not destroying the matter," Dr. Maya Chen reported from the Mars Research Facility. "It's removing it from our universe entirely. The readings suggest some kind of dimensional phasing." "Can we stop it?" Elena asked bluntly. The scientist hesitated. "We have a theory. The prototype weapons need adjustment, but if we're right about the dimensional phase variance—" "Make it happen, Doctor." Elena turned to face the assembled officers in her command center. "The Voidborn have made their opening move. Now we make ours." 12 hours later, humanity launched its first strike against the Voidborn. 3 interceptor ships, equipped with the modified phase variance weapons, approached the growing void in Neptune. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who understood the mission's likely outcome. Captain Sarah Takano's voice came clearly through the command channel. "Intercept team in position. Weapons locked on target coordinates. Commencing attack run." The command center fell silent as the interceptors dove toward the darkness-eating Neptune. On the main screen, energy beams of impossible color, a shifting violet that hurt the eyes, lanced from the ships into the void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then at the edge of the void, a ripple appeared. The nothingness seemed to shudder, to recoil. "It's working," someone shouted. But the victory was short-lived. The void pulsed, and a tendril of darkness shot out, engulfing the lead interceptor. Captain Takano's transmission cut mid-word. The ship didn't explode, it simply vanished. The remaining interceptors continued firing, their weapons causing more ripples in the void. Then, unexpectedly, the Voidborn scout retreated. The expansion of the void stopped, and the anomaly moved away from Neptune at increasing speed. "Are they running?" Elena's executive officer asked in disbelief. "No," Elena replied, watching the trajectory. "They're reporting back. We hurt them, however slightly, and now they know we can fight." She turned to face her officers. "They'll be back, and next time it won't be a scout." As the anomaly disappeared from sensor range, Elena gazed at the wounded gas giant on the display. A vast chunk of Neptune was simply gone, leaving a perfect hemispherical void. It was both a sobering reminder of what they faced and the first glimmer of hope. The Voidborn could be affected. They could be fought. "Send everything we've learned to every research facility," Elena ordered. "We have days, maybe hours before they return in force. I want every ship, every platform, and every weapon upgraded with the phase variance technology." As her officers rushed to comply, Elena turned to find Zorth watching her, the alien scales now pulsing with a brilliant golden hue she'd never seen before. "In all our centuries of flight," the Tellurian said softly, "we never saw the Voidborn retreat, not once." Elena allowed herself a tight smile. "Then welcome to a new era, Zorth. The era where the hunted become the hunters." But deep inside, she knew the real battle was yet to come. She had bought humanity time, but only time. The Voidborn would return, and when they did, they would come with purpose. The question wasn't if Earth could win, it was whether victory was even possible against an enemy that unmade reality itself. As she gazed at the wounded Neptune, Elena made a silent promise. If humanity was to make its last stand here, it would be a stand remembered across the stars. Defiance in the dark, the waiting was the hardest part. For 6 days after the Neptune encounter, the solar system held its breath. Evacuation ships, now fewer in number, continued to depart Earth, carrying those who'd lost their nerve after seeing what a single Voidborn scout had done to Neptune. But for each person who fled, another stepped forward to volunteer for the defense forces. Elena hadn't slept more than 4 hours at a stretch since the encounter. She paced the command center, reviewing tactical simulations, studying the meager data they'd gathered, and coordinating with research teams across the system. "Commander, you need rest," her XO insisted during a quiet moment. "You'll be no good to anyone if you collapse." "I'll rest when—" Elena's reply was cut short by the wail of proximity alarms. Multiple anomalies detected. The sensor officer shouted, "Approaching from Vector 227 by 114. It's not just one this time." The main display flared to life, showing the outer system. Where Neptune's orbit stretched around the sun, 5 distinct distortions now approached, each larger than the scout they'd encountered. Time to inner system? Elena demanded, fatigue forgotten. At current velocity, 38 hours to Mars. Orbit. Elena activated the command channel. All forces to alert status. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Execute Operation Firewall. Operation Firewall was humanity's first line of defense, a network of automated platforms, positioned in a sphere around the inner system, each equipped with the modified phase variance weapons. If they couldn't stop the Voidborn, they might at least slow them down. Dr. Chen, what's the status of Project Aurora? Elena asked over a private channel to Mars. We're close, Maya Chen replied, her holographic image showing signs of the same exhaustion Elena felt. The test firing showed promising results, but scaling up has been challenging. We need more time. Time is one luxury we don't have, Elena said grimly. The platforms will buy us what they can. After that, it's the orbital defenses and then Earth itself. As the Voidborn approached, humanity watched through the eyes of remote drones and sensors. The 5 anomalies moved with disturbing coordination, spreading out to form a crescent that would sweep through the system. The first platform engaged when the Voidborn crossed Uranus's orbit. Its weapons fired, the strange violet energy lancing into the nearest anomaly. As before, the void rippled and recoiled. 2 more platforms joined the attack, concentrating fire on the same target. For a breathless moment, it seemed to work. The anomaly's advance slowed, its edges fluctuating wildly. Then the other Voidborn responded. Tendrils of nothingness stretched out, not toward the platforms, but toward each other. Where they connected, space itself seemed to fold, and a wave of distortion swept outward. The platforms in its path simply blinked out of existence. No explosion, no debris, just gone, along with the chunk of space they'd occupied. They're communicating, Elena realized aloud. They're adapting to our weapons. Over the next 24 hours, humanity witnessed the systematic destruction of Operation Firewall. Platform after platform engaged, causing momentary disruption before being erased. Each engagement provided valuable data, but the cost was staggering. By the time the Voidborn reached Mars orbit, only a handful of platforms remained. The Red Planet's defense fleet moved to intercept, led by Admiral Hassan aboard the flagship Intrepid. 30 ships, the best that humanity could muster, formed a barrier between Mars and the approaching void. We've modified our weapons based on the platform data, Hassan reported to Elena. The phase variance generators are operating at triple capacity. Be careful, Admiral, Elena warned. They're learning from each engagement. Someone has to hold the line, Hassan replied simply. Mars research needs time to finish Project Aurora. We'll give them that time. The battle for Mars was brief and terrible. The defense fleet's opening salvo actually pushed the Voidborn back, the combined firepower causing the anomalies to contract momentarily. For one precious hour, it seemed the tide might turn. Then the Voidborn changed tactics. Instead of pressing forward, they surrounded the fleet, creating a sphere of distortion that slowly contracted. Ships tried to break free, their engines straining against the warping of space itself. Admiral Hassan's final transmission was calm, almost contemplative. They're not just erasing matter, Commander. They're altering the fundamental laws of physics within their influence. Tell Dr. Chen. Tell her to look at the quantum foam. The answer is there. Then the Intrepid, along with the entire Mars defense fleet, was gone. The loss hit Elena like a physical blow. Admiral Hassan had been her mentor, the one who'd sponsored her admission to the academy when no one else would take a chance on an orphan from the Chicago ruins. Mars Research Station reports the Voidborn are approaching their position. Her, EXO reported quietly. They're initiating emergency protocols. Evacuation status? Elena asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. They're not evacuating, Commander. Dr. Chen has locked down the facility. They're staying to complete Project Aurora. Elena opened a channel immediately. Maya, get your people out of there now, that's an order. Dr. Chen's face appeared on screen, calm despite the alarms blaring in the background. No time, Elena. We figured it out, but someone needs to initiate the sequence on site. She held up a data crystal. Everything you need is here. I'm launching it on a stealth drone. Track these coordinates. Maya, don't... Hassan was right. The scientist continued as if Elena hadn't spoken. The Voidborn aren't destroyers. They're transformers. They're shifting our reality to match theirs because they can't survive in ours. It's not attack, it's colonization. Behind her, technicians worked frantically, ignoring the growing darkness visible through the facility's windows. Project Aurora inverts the process, Maya explained rapidly. Instead of fighting them directly, we create a field that reinforces our universe's physical laws. It won't destroy them, but it will make our space uninhabitable for them. Get out of there and tell me in person, Elena pleaded. Maya smiled sadly. Someone has to calibrate the prototype. The drone is away. Everything else you need is on it. Promise me you'll use it, Elena. Promise me Earth won't fall. Before Elena could respond, the transmission dissolved into static. Mars Research Station, along with Dr. Maya Chen and her team, vanished into the expanding void. Grief and rage warred within Elena, but she forced both aside. Later, there would be time for mourning. Now, there was only the mission. Track that drone, she ordered, and prepare the lunar facility for Project Aurora implementation. The stealth drone arrived 12 hours later, carrying the data crystal and a prototype device that looked deceptively simple. A silver sphere the size of a basketball, covered in intricate patterns that shifted and changed as she watched. Elena assembled a team of the brightest remaining scientists to decode Maya's final work. What they found was both brilliant and desperate. It's not a weapon in the traditional sense, explained Dr. Alvarez, the quantum physicist who had taken charge of the project. It's a reality anchor. Dr. Chen found a way to create a cascading field that reinforces the quantum structure of our universe, making it impossible for the Voidborn to maintain their phase variance. Will it work? Elena asked bluntly. In theory, yes, but there's a catch. Alvarez pointed to the schematics. The device creates an initial field, but it needs to be triggered at the right moment, when the Voidborn are fully committed to their phase shift. And someone has to physically activate it in proximity to the Voidborn front. A suicide mission, Elena stated flatly. Yes, and we only have the one prototype. Elena studied the device, Maya's final gift. How long to build more? With what we have? Months. Maybe weeks if we strip every quantum computer in the system. The Voidborn will reach Earth in less than 48 hours. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the math. One device, one chance. Elena made her decision. Prepare my ship. I'll deploy the device myself. Protests erupted immediately, but Elena silenced them with a raised hand. I'm not asking for volunteers. This is my responsibility. For all we know, the Voidborn targeted humanity because of what we did at Neptune. My order, my consequence. As preparations for the mission proceeded, Elena recorded her final orders and recommendations. If this failed, someone would need to lead what remained of humanity. She appointed her XO as acting commander and instructed him to implement the underground bunker plan, a last-ditch effort to preserve some fraction of the species. 6 hours before the Voidborn were expected to reach Earth orbit, Elena boarded the modified interceptor. The ship was stripped down to the essentials, its power systems rerouted to support Project Aurora and a single phase variance weapon for defense. This is Commander Kress, she broadcast across all frequencies as she launched. I am implementing Project Aurora. All forces maintain position per Operation Bulwark protocols. Earth's remaining orbital platforms and defense ships formed a protective sphere around the planet. They would engage only if Elena failed, a final line between humanity and extinction. As her interceptor accelerated toward the approaching Voidborn front, Elena reviewed Maya's notes one last time. The activation sequence was complex, requiring precise timing and positioning. Too far from the anomalies, and the field wouldn't propagate correctly. Too close, and she'd be erased before activation could complete. She needed to find the perfect balance point, the edge of oblivion. The Voidborn came into visual range, and Elena felt a primal fear rise within her. The void wasn't just darkness. It was an absence, a wrongness that hurt to look at directly. Where it passed, stars didn't just disappear. They never existed. "This is Commander Cress beginning approach," she reported, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Project Aurora device is armed and ready." As she neared the anomalies, strange effects began to manifest in her ship. Instruments flickered, showing impossible readings. The hull creaked as if under enormous pressure. Even gravity seemed to waver, objects floating momentarily before crashing down again. "I'm at the threshold," Elena reported as warning alarms blared around her. Beginning activation sequence. Her fingers moved across the controls, inputting the complex code that would trigger Project Aurora. The silver sphere began to pulse with inner light, patterns flowing across its surface with increasing speed. That's when she saw them. Ships, approaching from behind her, small and swift. For one terrible moment, she thought they might be human vessels attempting a rescue. Then she recognized their configuration, Tellarian design. "Zorth, what are you doing?" she demanded over an open channel. "What you taught us to do," came the reply, "to stand instead of flee." 5 Tellarian ships formed a protective ring around her interceptor, their weapons firing at the approaching void. They wouldn't last long, but they didn't need to. They just needed to buy her seconds. "Aurora sequence at 80%, Elena reported as the sphere's pulsing reached a fever pitch. The ship's systems were failing now, reality itself becoming unreliable at this proximity to the Voidborn. The void reached for her, tendrils of nothingness extending toward the interceptor. One by one, the Tellarian ships winked out of existence. Zorth's vessel was the last to go, holding position directly between Elena and the advancing front. "Sequence complete," Elena shouted as the sphere reached critical activation. She slammed her hand down on the release control, launching Project Aurora directly into the heart of the nearest anomaly. For a moment, nothing happened. The void continued its advance, swallowing space meter by meter. Then a flash of light so intense it overwhelmed the interceptor's darkening filters. Where the sphere had entered the void, a point of brilliant, white energy appeared, expanding outward in concentric rings. Where these rings touched the void, something extraordinary happened. The nothingness didn't just retreat, it transformed. Space itself reasserted, stars reappearing, light behaving normally again. The Voidborn recoiled, their coordinated formation breaking apart as the Aurora field expanded. They seemed to be trying to flee, to move away from the spreading effect. But the field moved faster than they could retreat. Elena watched in awe as the anomalies contracted, compressing into smaller and smaller regions of distortion until, with a final pulse of the Aurora field, they simply collapsed into pinpoints of intense gravity, and then disappeared entirely. Warning alarms still blared throughout her ship. The proximity to the void had damaged critical systems. Life support was failing, engines dead. But none of that mattered now. She had witnessed the impossible, the defeat of the Voidborn. As her interceptor drifted, Elena opened a channel to Earth. Project Aurora successful. Repeat. Project Aurora successful. The Voidborn have been neutralized. The cheers that erupted over the comm system were deafening. In that moment, no one cared about the damaged ship or her uncertain rescue prospects. Humanity had faced extinction and prevailed. Rescue came 3 hours later, an Earth defense vessel that had broken formation to retrieve her. As medical teams treated her for radiation exposure and the strange dimensional effects of proximity to the void, Elena received the full reports. The Aurora field had not just repelled the Voidborn, it had triggered a cascading effect that restored much of what had been taken. Neptune's missing section was reconstructing itself, matter reappearing as if from nowhere. The Mars research station remained gone, as did the defense fleet, but sensors detected particles reforming where they had once been. It would take years, perhaps decades, but what was lost might eventually return. More remarkably, ships were appearing at the edge of the system, evacuation vessels returning, carrying humans and aliens alike who had fled but now chose to return. Among them were vessels from species that had abandoned the fight years ago, drawn back by news of humanity's stand. 6 weeks after the battle, Elena stood before the United Earth Government Assembly, still using a cane to walk after her injuries. President Chen presented her with the planet's highest honor, but that meant less to her than what followed. Zorth's son, now the speaker for the remaining Tellurians, approached the podium. His scales rippled with colors Elena had never seen before, patterns that, she was told, represented profound respect. "For 300 years my people ran," he stated, his voice carrying through the silent chamber. "We survived only by fleeing faster than our companions. We abandoned worlds, allies, even our own people when necessary." He turned to face Elena directly. "Then we met humanity, who taught us that survival without purpose is merely existence. You showed us that there are things worth fighting for, even against impossible odds." From a compartment in his environmental suit, the speaker produced a small crystalline object. "This data core contains the collective memory of our species, our art, our science, our history. We once carried it as a memorial to our lost worlds. Now we present it as a gift to our new home if you will have us." President Chen accepted the crystal with solemn dignity. "Earth welcomes the Tellurian people, not as refugees, but as fellow defenders of this system." Similar ceremonies followed. In the coming months, other species arrived, some returning from evacuation, others drawn by the story of the small, stubborn planet that refused to run. Each brought gifts, technology, knowledge, resources, but most importantly, they brought a new perspective. The galaxy had spent centuries fleeing the Voidborn, an endless retreat that had become a way of life. Humanity, in its inexperience or its arrogance or perhaps its simple stubbornness, had chosen differently. In doing so, they had changed everything. Elena eventually recovered enough to accept command of Earth's first true interspecies defense force. Ships crewed by humans, Tellurians, and a dozen other species now patrolled the solar system, implementing the Aurora technology on a scale Dr. Chen could never have imagined. The Voidborn never returned to Sol. Whether they had been destroyed or had simply learned to avoid this system remained unknown. But other threats would come. The universe was vast and often hostile. When they did, they would find not just humanity, but a coalition of species who had learned the most important lesson of all, that some things were worth standing for. As Elena looked out at the fleet assembling above Earth, ships of human design alongside alien vessels, she thought of all those who hadn't lived to see this day. Admiral Hassan, Dr. Chen, Captain Takano, Zorth. Their sacrifice had purchased more than survival. It had purchased the future. Commander, her new XO, a young Tellurian officer, interrupted her thoughts. "The Andari delegation has arrived. They wish to discuss implementing Aurora technology in the Sagittarius arm." Elena nodded, turning away from the viewport. "Tell them I'll be right there." The stars outside seemed brighter somehow, more alive. Perhaps it was just her imagination, or perhaps it was the knowledge that somewhere out there, other worlds now looked to Earth not with pity for its stubbornness, but with gratitude for its stand. All other species ran. Humanity chose to fight. And in doing so, they had changed the course of galactic history forever.